Could you be the red flag? Understanding what we attract in relationships. Have you ever found yourself watching one of those videos? How to spot a red flag in someone. 5 signs you're dating a narcissist. What emotionally unavailable people say. And nodding along like you've just cracked the code. It feels good, doesn't it? To feel wiser. Safer. More in control. Like now, maybe, you won't make the same mistake again. And yet, sometimes, the same kind of person shows up. The same cycle. The same pain. So here's a question we rarely ask. What if I am the red flag? Not in a shameful way. Not in a, you're the problem, way. But in a deeper, more courageous way. What if I've been so busy learning how to avoid pain, that I forgot to notice how my own pain might be the one doing the choosing? There's a man I once knew who said he was a red flag magnet. He'd been through several painful relationships. In each one, he described being manipulated, gaslit, cheated on, or controlled. He told me, I have a kind heart. I'm loyal. I always show up, but I always get burned. At first, I believed that was the full story. And maybe he did too. But slowly, through the edges of his words, something else began to show. He didn't set boundaries until it was too late. He didn't voice his needs clearly. He avoided conflict but carried silent resentment. And each time a relationship ended, he blamed himself for staying. But also blamed them for being impossible to love. He never asked, what drew me here in the first place? What was I trying to fix, prove, or replay? Because the truth is, red flags don't always come wearing red. Sometimes, they come wrapped in longing. In chemistry. In intensity that feels like destiny. But is really just familiarity from a wound that hasn't healed yet. And so, we find ourselves in this loop. We spot what's wrong in others, but not what's unfinished in us. This man realized, over time, that he had a deep fear of being abandoned. So he clung to people even when they hurt him. He ignored early signs because losing someone felt more terrifying than being mistreated. And slowly, something tragic began to happen. His partner started feeling suffocated. Not because he was unkind, but because his entire identity depended on being loved. And when they pulled away, he panicked. He became reactive. He'd guilt them. Plead. Shut down. Suddenly, they weren't the only ones with red flags. It takes immense honesty to ask. When I say someone else is unsafe, am I also willing to ask what in me chose to stay? When I say they mistreated me, can I also ask where I stopped showing up for myself first? This isn't about blaming victims. This is about reclaiming power. Because healing doesn't happen just by avoiding the wrong people. It happens when we start becoming the kind of person who no longer needs the lesson hidden inside them. When we don't examine our own patterns, we stay trapped in the story of what they did to us. And while that story might be true, it's never the whole truth. Because most of us don't attract relationships at the level of what we say we want. We attract relationships at the level of what feels familiar. And what feels familiar is often built in the earliest chapters of our lives. The unavailable parent. The unpredictable caregiver. The ache of being seen only when useful, not for who we really were. So when someone arrives in adulthood with emotional distance, criticism, or volatility, it's not just a red flag. It's a reenactment. And if we're not conscious, we don't run from the fire. We walk right into it, hoping this time it will warm us instead of burn us. This is where the real healing begins. Not in the blaming. Not in labeling others. But in tracing the ache back to its origin and asking, what was I trying to heal through them? What part of me feels like love must be earned, fixed, or fought for? And who would I be if I no longer needed pain to feel alive? That same man, the one who once said, "I'm just too kind for this world," eventually sat down with his partner and really listened. She wasn't cruel. She wasn't broken. She was tired. Tired of being the emotional container for all his unresolved fear. Tired of being idealized one moment and shut out the next. Tired of feeling like she was responsible for managing his emotional world. And for the first time, he didn't defend himself. He didn't say, "But I'm doing my best." He simply said, "I never knew I was asking you to carry what I haven't yet faced." That moment changed him. Not because he was shamed, but because he finally let in the truth. He hadn't been in relationship. He'd been trying to be rescued. It's a subtle thing, this difference. But when we're relating from a wound, we don't choose people with clarity. We choose with urgency. With fear. With a desperation to finally feel safe. And in doing so, we create exactly what we fear. We end up alone again, feeling rejected, but not realizing we've been rejecting parts of ourselves all along. This is what people mean when they say, "You need to do the inner work." It's not about fixing everything. It's about becoming aware of the parts of us that are still trying to earn love. In ways that never worked to begin with. So what is the inner work, really? It's not about perfection. It's not about never making mistakes, never reacting, never getting triggered. It's about noticing, with kindness and honesty, what gets stirred up in us, and why. It's realizing that many of our adult dynamics aren't random. They're patterned. They're stories we've lived so long, we don't even recognize them as stories anymore. Like when someone doesn't text back, and your chest tightens. You tell yourself, "They're not interested. I always get left." But underneath that, there's a younger version of you. A boy or girl who once waited for love that came inconsistently. And now, even as an adult, any delay feels like abandonment. The person you're dating might not be the one creating that fear. But the fear is real, because it's old. And it will keep driving the bus until you learn to speak to it. This is where we start becoming conscious participants in our relationships, instead of unconscious reenactors. It means learning to say, "This pain I'm feeling, it belongs to me. And before I hand it over to someone else to fix, let me understand what it's really asking for." This kind of responsibility is tender. It's not self-blame, it's self-awareness. It's choosing to see that I'm not just reacting to you. I'm reacting to everything you've awakened in me. And in that space, we begin to pause. We begin to relate differently. We stop needing others to be perfectly safe. Because we start becoming safer for ourselves. We stop labeling people as red flags. Just because they don't manage our triggers. And we begin to ask a much more powerful question. Where am I still outsourcing my sense of worth to someone else's behavior? The man I told you about, his healing didn't come from finding a better partner. It came from sitting with his own fear of being unlovable. Not fixing it. Not bypassing it. Just being with it. Letting it soften in the light of truth. That's the quiet revolution. When we stop trying to fix others, and start meeting the abandoned places within us. Not because we're broken, but because we're finally ready to come home to ourselves. Here's what's hard to admit. Sometimes, we become the red flag. Not because we are bad people, but because we are scared people. Scared of being alone. Scared of being unworthy. Scared that if we don't hold on tightly, love will slip through our fingers again. But here's the thing. Clinging isn't love. Pleasing isn't intimacy. Avoiding conflict isn't peace. These are adaptations. Shaped long ago. When we didn't know how to ask for what we needed. Or when asking only led to more pain. If we never bring compassion to those adaptations, they quietly run our lives. They choose our partners. They shape our reactions. And eventually, they become the very patterns we say we want to escape. So let's take a breath here. This isn't about calling yourself out. This is about calling yourself in. Back to awareness. Back to tenderness. Back to the possibility that your relationships can be rooted in something deeper than fear. Not every red flag is about a dangerous person. Sometimes, the real danger is abandoning ourselves over and over. Just to keep someone else close. Sometimes, the flag is waving not to warn us about them, but to wake us up to us. And when we listen, when we really listen, we realize that most people aren't trying to hurt each other. They're just hurting. And that includes us. So the question becomes, can I hold myself with enough love? That I no longer need someone else to be perfect? Can I take enough responsibility? That I stop blaming people for showing me where I still need to heal? Can I see others clearly? Without making them responsible for my past? This is how we grow. Not by cutting people off at the first sign of discomfort. Not by labeling everything that scares us as toxic. But by gently asking, what is this situation inviting me to see in myself? And most importantly, by remembering that peace doesn't come from pushing people away. It comes from no longer needing to. Because when you no longer abandon yourself, you stop attracting the ones who will. You begin to choose with clarity. Not from a wound. And love, in its truest form, begins to feel less like a test, and more like a homecoming. Subscribe to these channels for more content like this.